we start with like outlining concept. So like, what is our concept? What's the idea? Like, what is the framework of like what we're thinking about? And then we create like a production timeline and a budget. And then from there, we create a storyboard, a mood board, or a mood video. So this is really helpful depending on like how structured. So if you want to create a narrative that has sequences and is really like a film structure, a storyboard is really great, because a storyboard like allows you to create like a narrative sequence. Whereas a mood board, if you want something a bit more abstract in terms of like visual aesthetic, just creating a mood board to outline like how you visually want to perceive or see it or see the world come together. A mood video is really good. So you just literally take found footage or anything you want and you make a video, and you basically create the expression of you basically create the like emotional expression or the like pace or the like vibrations or feelings of what you imagine this piece to be. And that is a really helpful piece to like frame and have all your have everything ready so that you're ready to kind of go into the stages of making. And then you do the casting or location scouting, which can be digital or physical. So either you're scouting as in like online, you're finding characters, or physically you're trying to find people to work with to like create their characters or work with them, or you're trying to find like references of characters you want to build that may be non-human. And then with the location scouting, is like the idea is like you're finding what kind of environment you want to be working in, or you might be finding assets online on like say Unreal marketplace, like assets you want to buy. And then the next stage is the art department, which is the like set design and the character design. And this is like the different ways in which you can do it. So this is what's really helpful, is to like know, don't do all of it from scratch, or like this is how we would advise. It's like, unless you want to spend ages, try to like, you can have like stages in which you learn things. So you don't have to be like, okay, there's a set design, so I need to model everything from scratch. Like, that's not necessarily true. So you can either make your own, or you can kit bash it or alter existing objects, or you can code your own, or you can purchase existing objects. Then with the set design, so you're modeling the objects, your environment building, you're creating materials and textures, and often you can be working with like effects, for example, particle systems. Maybe you're bringing a video into the film, or you're making a post-processing effect for it that's very integral to like the set design of the space. A huge part of it often is the weather and the physics as well, because the difference, I guess, with you working in a gaming engine is that you're kind of working like literally the environment is a blank paper, and you're building from the sky and like maybe what weather it is, what time of day it is. Then with the character design, you're modeling the character, you're creating the hair, the makeup, you're styling the clothes, and you're creating the materials for it and the accessories. So with the styling and clothes, you can either design your clothes or pattern making, so something like Marvelous Designer, or you can use what's the other one?
That's like I forget the name of it, like Clo 3D.
Clo 3D, yeah.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah, but that again, that's like a whole, in a way, that's like a whole other thing to learn, while you're learning so many other things. So there are actually, you know, sometimes you might be able to find like existing digital clothes that are compatible with the type of character design that you're working with, which might make your process a bit simpler. And then you can just alter the material of that to make it more unique, so it doesn't look so poor, I guess. But then if you're making the clothes yourself, then you're designing the pattern in one of those like Marvelous Designer or Clo 3D, and then you're actually kind of creating the dynamics of it so it actually responds like a physical fabric would in real life. And then there's the process of kind of like rendering that out as an Alembic file, or you can bring it in directly and work with the physics in something like Unreal or even Character Creator to do that.
And then yeah, like you can completely avoid that step if you just want to make it like more non-human. You just put a texture on the body. So there's like ways in which you can be like, okay, I'm not going to do this part this time, I'm going to go for this bit.
Yeah.
And then there's the animation. So the animation is really the characters, the models, and the sequencing. So with the characters, you need to have the body motion capture, the face motion capture, and the hand motion capture. And if you do body motion capture, you can probably the most simplest thing to start with might be you could just use Mixamo and just use an automatic rigging. So
so Mixamo is a free online library from Adobe, which has tons of like free animation, like already motion captured animation clips that you can download, and you can either like rig your character directly in Mixamo and then it will download the character again with the animation already included, or you can download a preset animation and retarget it in the software that you're working in. But it's honestly such a great resource and library, because even though we have access to a motion capture suite and we have facial motion capture and we have those things, actually it's not always that simple, and like you normally need 2 or 3 people with you to do the motion capture. So sometimes using the preset ones that are freely available makes your life so much easier. And I think if you're like doing a lot of CGI and you're doing a lot of character animation, you'll begin to recognize that everybody uses Mixamo as well, and you can kind of identify the exact animation clip they're using. So that's like kind of like
20%.
Yeah, you know that's like insider knowledge, but it's also like comforting to know that like even not very technically skilled people still use it. So it's yeah.
And then so you can
sorry, I was going to say with for the body motion capture, there's several ways that you can do it. So you can rig the body manually and animate it quite like manually, which is not, I would recommend that route, to be honest.
So that's either in like Blender or Cinema, you just create your own bones, which some of you might have already done, which is great for also like objects, I guess. Like that could be really, or if you want to create something like a really non-human movement, that's more simple, that can be really
for sure, yeah.
And then there's also you can do it through AI, so you can use Deep Motion, which is also a free software. Still free, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, it's still free. I think there's just a limit to how much you can download in one go, I think. But that's pretty great, because you can just take a video of someone moving in front of like a white wall. Make sure the camera is really static, and then you upload that onto their software, like browser-based kind of plugin, and it will just rig a character for you. And similarly to Mixamo, you can either download the animated skeleton directly, or you can rig it to a character in Deep Motion. But that's also a great tool. And like I think sometimes for us the results aren't as like polished as we'd like them to be, but that's often when we're working with a very humanoid looking character. But if you are working with a character that isn't so human, you can really like that kind of like level of detail you can actually sacrifice, because it doesn't affect what you're showing so much. And then with the facial motion capture, which we'll show you today, you can actually just use like an iPhone. I think there is like availability, like capabilities to do it on Android as well, but we've personally never worked with that. I wouldn't rule it out, but yeah, it's very like, I think with iPhone it's actually a lot I mean, they've interfaced everything, so it's a lot smoother for you if you're just starting out, for example. It's less hacky that way, or less like technical. And then for the same with hand motion capture, there's a little device that you can get that tracks your hand movements, and then but like the face and hand, you can also do them manually. But all of those aspects of body motion, facial motion capture, and hand motion capture, there's these stages that you can break it down into. So that's rehearsal, so figuring out what the movements are, figuring out how the movements you want to do, whether they actually work with motion capture or not. Then a big problem that we've experienced with motion capture before is calibration. And if your suit is not calibrated correctly, then it will really create awful data that's like impossible to work with. So getting calibration right at the very beginning is really essential. Then you figure out your animation score and you record it, and then you get to the stage where you can actually clean up the motion capture data. And that's a really normal part of mocap. It's quite icky maybe, and maybe not something that we're actually that good at doing, but it really does make a difference when it's done properly. Like you can create really smooth movements. Yeah, and then it's editing it into a sequence and then preparing that to bring into the gaming engine.
So also with the animation score, what's really important is to like, so for example, if you're going to be doing the animation, you basically kind of like similar to Storyboard, you need to like literally lay out and have a document which lays out every single animation you're going to create. And you need to be really methodical with this stage to get it like really accurate. I think again, it's like what level you're doing, but if you're doing it with like high fidelity characters that move fairly realistically, or even it's not even that it moves super realistically, it's literally if it's a sequence of events, you need to, or you're making some short film or a longer film, you have to create really methodical lists for the animation score, and tick it off very like orderly to be able to like just make the process a bit smoother.
Yeah.
So for example, with the body, face and hand motion capture, often you're having to like, unless you have a full bodysuit that has the hands on it as well, and you're doing it at a studio with the face rig, you're going to have to combine them all together, which is like can be just like a bit tedious.
But so the next stage is actually like set dressing, but because we always collaborate when we're doing this, like not one person isn't actually responsible for all of these things. Like I will focus a bit more on the characters and the animation, and Hannah will focus a bit more on the set dressing, for example. So in working together, we're considering the animation score in relation to the set at the same time, because, and I think that that's an important thing to acknowledge, because if you don't do that and you create this animation and then your set is really different, you kind of have to do it again or make things work. So just good to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So then when you do the set dressing, it's very much like in a film production where you're like, okay, now you've got everybody's like the cameras, people are there, like the actors are about to come in, we need to set up the space, you've only got 2 days to do it. But this is great because you don't have 2 days to do it. You can, well, you might do, because you might have your deadline, but but you like basically like what it is just like literally putting everything together, so and then so that we know everything is set up ready to film. So it's the character setup, the animation setup. So you want to make sure the animation doesn't like go into a rock. So you want to making sure everything, you want to test out the sequences and making sure that everything kind of fits all together as one thing. And then the lighting setup too. Then you go on to the cinematics. So the cinematics is there's a camera setup. So the camera setup has the settings, color grading, aperture, focal length, and manual focus distance. So this is like, again, which actually we have talked about it throughout, but it is, again, this is all for Unreal Engine. You can do this in Unity. It will be much harder in Unity. In Unreal, it will be much easier, unless you know how to use Unity. For sure, Unreal will make it 100 times easier, this setup.
Yeah.
And you can do it across different platforms, the same thing, that you can apply this to anything, but it is more tailored for Unreal Engine. So for example, you could do it in Cinema 4D as well. Then you have like the sequence, so you have your camera set up, you have the sequencing, you have the editing and the sequencing, the post-processing, the exporting and the rendering. So with the sequencing, you're often sequencing the characters, objects, the sky and the weather, or any particle system. So the other is like any sort of effects that you want that are inside the gaming engine. One thing that to be conscientious of is just that if you're creating some sort of scene, and you don't, just be careful of this sky dynamics, because if you want it to change from one set to another set, you need to consider what time of day it is, or like how time changes or weather changes. Then yeah, you can actually edit within the sequencer, so that's one thing that you can do. So you don't even have to it's not just editing within say Premiere or something, it's also editing within the sequencer. Then there's the post-processing, which can be the lens effect and camera effect, exporting, rendering. Then you go on to the post, which again is like video editing, color grading, special effects. That's probably something like Premiere or Final Cut Pro. And then there's the typography design. If you might work with some HUD design as well, because you're using gaming engines, so it's like often like the aesthetically people do lots of HUD designs.
Yeah, we tend to work in like After Effects for those things, and also for the title and intro and credits and things. So that kind of is another package that kind of ties everything together at the end, and finally it gets to sound design and score. And also, I mean, like first it's really important when we create something really cinematic that it feels really immersive as well. So having like Foley or really well done sound design is like essential to like carrying the visuals that we've just made, I think.
And also the Foley is important if you want to make things, so like even like how the sound, like, so when we work with sound design, it's like, how does this, like, what sort of environment is it? So how does the sound actually travel within that space? Or like, what would, like, for example, if you're in a desert, like, how would that sound actually travel? So there's certain things like this, again, with like character design, the thing that you can compensate is the sound. Like, the sound can really make, you can create the sound to be like much more layered rather than the character design, so that it gives off the effect or the motive feeling. And then it's the exporting. And once you've done the exporting, you have a CGI.